Hey guys, I just want to make a quick video about the things I use to study for my instrument check ride. There's a lot of things you can buy out there to help prep you, and those are great. I didn't use anything that was paid. Everything I used was free. So I tried to compile them here for you. I will leave all the links below, but let me know in the comments if there's things that I could add to this video and whether you thought this was helpful or not. So to start, there are a couple PDFs that are free that have a ton of information and are just really useful, I think, to study and kind of cut down on all the crap and really get to what you need to know. So there's the IFR Quick Review Study Sheet from Pilot's Cafe, and there's the Instrument Know-All handout. They're pretty similar in content. There's some slight differences between each one, and each of them offer a little bit of something the other doesn't. So I like to use them both. You don't have to, you could use one or the other if you like to. What I did with these is eventually I made flashcards on my phone of kind of each section and each question if I wanted to. The advantage to this is that you can study it anywhere. If you're on the train, if you're in the car, if you're laying, if you're waiting to fall asleep at night and you can't go to sleep, wake up, do some of these flashcards, because this all takes a lot of time and dedication and visiting the content often for it all to sink in. And it seems overwhelming at first, but you can do it. You just gotta keep visiting it often, and you'll be surprised how much you know at the end and how quick you can really do it if you put in the practice. So those two documents are awesome. Also, I put on this page YouTube. YouTube's an awesome resource. Andy Muniz has a great video of the things a lot of pilots miss on their check ride. I watched that in 1.5 time, and I took notes while he was talking. Taking notes was nice because I didn't have to watch his video again to study the material he talks about. I could take those notes and I could put them into flashcards, and he talks really slow in the video, so it's nice to jot down what he's talking about, review it with yourself, and then if you want, you can go back and watch his video and have him talk about it again. That's always going to reinforce it in your mind. Next is the low enroute IFR altitude chart. You just gotta at least know the simple stuff. You should be using these anyway, but you want to have a pretty good working understanding of it. At the bare minimum, the simple stuff on here, the minimum crossing altitude, all the stuff you're using all the time. Be able to talk about that with someone. Get a buddy and practice. You guys should sit down, whether your buddy is a pilot or not, and tell them about each thing on the chart. If you don't know what something is, look it up in the chart legend and then explain it. This is going to simulate exactly how your check ride's going to go, because at some point the DPE is going to pull out a chart or pull up your chart on ForeFlight, point to different things and ask you what they are, and you'll have to explain what they mean and how they apply to you. So this practice of actually explaining what each thing is going to directly correlate to helping you during the check ride. During your private and your commercial or any other check ride, practicing this helps a lot. It's going to make your check ride go easier if you're accustomed to explaining everything that you're supposed to know. There's also a FAA aeronautical chart user guide that kind of goes into more depth on each of the symbols on your chart. And that can be helpful if there are some things you have more questions about or that maybe aren't on the chart legend. That goes a little bit deeper on all those things. And I'll link that below. The approach plate is similar to the IFR chart. You got to know all the simple things for sure. You can look stuff up, but it's good to know pretty much everything on here and do the same thing. Sit down with someone else and explain to them what each thing means and why it's there. All digital copies on apps like ForeFlight or Garmin Pilot will have this sidebar here with the dates for when this approach plate is good for. So it's good to know that those dates are there. There's a couple different figures all around the edge of this approach plate. The examiner will definitely ask you like how often these come out, and you can kind of cheat and look at that date, and if you forget how often they come out, and say, oh well, that's about this many weeks, so it's really nice to know that's there if you forget something, and just got to know everything on here. Weather is super important for instrument flying and flying in general. The two PDFs go over weather quite a bit. Some things that I think they miss are verified weather sources. You need to be using verified weather sources. So weather.com is not really a verified weather source. 1-800-WX-BRIEF is a verified weather source. There's a couple other verified weather sources. I don't even know them. I use WX-BRIEF. Aviationweather.gov is great, especially for pulling up charts and looking at winds aloft. You can get that on ForeFlight as well too, and that's fine. But it's nice to know a little bit about aviationweather.gov because it is useful. And then, before I forget, present and future weather. You're going to get present weather from METARs, future in TAFs, and know how to read coded versions of METARs and TAFs. A lot of people don't learn that, and it's not necessarily bad to not learn it, but it's good to know in case your DPE wants you to, and it's not too hard to learn, and it's kind of fun. I would recommend getting an app that tells you the METAR and TAF for your favorite airports near you, and look at it every day. If you're on your phone anyway, like I am, you can flip it open and say, oh yeah, it's clear, just like the METAR says, and it's going to rain later, and then it does rain later, so it's cool to see how that works. Getting an examiner gauge is super important, I think. You don't have to necessarily get a written document, but at least talking to someone about what the examiner is like is super helpful. You want to be comfortable and you want to do well on your check ride. It's going to help to kind of know what you're getting into. Some examiners are, a little bit less amicable than others, and some of them have certain things that they really want you to know and really care about. It's good to know what those things are before you get in there so that you can be ready for those questions and just makes the check ride go smoother. Specific topics like, are they really particular about the words you use to describe hypoxia, or are they really particular about NOTAMs, and you need to be able to read a bunch of NOTAMs. That stuff happens. So find out what they're like, what the flow of their check ride is like, and that'll help you prepare and go in with the right mindset to that exam. So your FAR AIM book, whether you use a digital version or a paper version, has a lot of useful stuff in it. All the regs you can find, in articles or in other, studied documents. But it's good to sometimes go after you've read those documents and you kind of get the idea of what the reg's about and read the actual reg. It's a little bit like reading another language, right? You're trying to lawyer up and understand all this legal jargon, but it's good to see that everything you learn, like 3-2-1 rule, is within this legal document here that's not necessarily straightforward. So here's the 3-2-1s right here in this paragraph. It's good to just read something that explains the rule, go in and read the actual rule, tab it out, highlight it, and I think that's the best way to understand. There's also advisory circulars. Those will help clarify what certain regs mean. It doesn't matter what the reg means to you, it's what the FAA wants you to know from the reg. So those advisory circulars can help clear up misunderstandings of the regulations. And it's good to know exactly what those regs mean when you're talking to your examiner who wants you to be saying the things that the FAA wants you to say and not just what you understand the regs to say. The ACS is useful. I got a lot of advice to, quote unquote, just study the ACS. Well, that's nice. That's not super useful when you're getting started studying. You can use the ACS to kind of check your learning and make sure you're covering everything. It's especially useful towards the end when you're trying to make sure you're hitting everything and maybe you're finding gaps in your knowledge and your training. And the ACS is right there on the FAA's website. So it's free and you can go check it out. It's a good free resource. The POH for your plane is super useful, and know your way around it. In general, what's inside it, where the paragraphs talking about the power plant are, the electrical system, because you're going to get some questions about your specific plane, and you don't need to know every specification by memory. It's good to know a bit about the electrical system, the fuel. You definitely want to know the anti-icing features of your plane. You want to know that. You can look through this if you need during the exam. I've done that before. Said, hey, can I open up the POH and look at a graph so I can get you that number? And the examiner just totally okay with that. Okay. Checklists are super useful. We use them in the plane all the time, but we can also use them for keeping track of our study progress. I used a study checklist to make sure I was covering all the topics I needed to, and that if I thought of a topic I needed to cover more, I could write it down somewhere and come back to it later. Make sure your instructor is using a syllabus. They're going to help you make sure that you know all the study areas you need to know everything about, and if they're using a syllabus, they're not going to miss anything either. If they're not using the syllabus, go on the internet and find one. They're all over the place. Fill out what you did, look at what you think you maybe didn't do, and ask your instructor, hey, I've got this syllabus here. I think did we miss this one, or did I just forget we went over it? And your instructor should be helpful and happy that you're leading your own learning there by pulling out a syllabus. Another checklist I like to use is a check ride day checklist. So what do I need the day of the check ride? I print out a ton of stuff and I bring it to the check ride, or I have a ton of stuff on my computer in the check ride so that I can access it if I need, and so that I can pull it out if the examiner asks me a question, and I don't necessarily have to memorize as much that way, but I can show him that I'm prepared and that I know the resources I have. So here's an example. This is for my commercial check ride. This is the checklist I made. You want to make sure you bring money. You need the engine airframe logbooks. Those are super important things. Other things are just stuff I knew I wanted, but that was really helpful in organizing myself because it's stressful that last day and the day of to get everything together. And that checklist will make sure you don't miss anything. Bonus here, I think there are kind of like 5 steps for me in doing well in a check ride. Check rides can be fun if you're prepared and you have a nice examiner and the weather works out and everything kind of lines up. It can be a great time. You're getting together with someone who knows a ton about flying, so come prepared. Kind of goes without saying, if you're prepared, it's going to be a better time. Practice with someone, like we were saying about the charts. If you practice explaining things, it's going to make you seem more confident on the check ride, and you're going to have more fun because you're not going to be explaining, what an MDA is for the first time, and you're going to be able to work out any kinks there beforehand. So really useful, I think. Know the plane you're flying, know everything about it. And you don't have to memorize everything, but you at least need to have with you all the stats on it in case they ask you about it. Work through your mistakes for sure. So you're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. Work through them. If there is a safety concern, you should be the one that's acting on it. You should be the one, going around on the bad approach or, making that safety call. If the examiner has to do that for you, you might be not passing that check ride. So make sure you're proactive in keeping you both safe and don't get bogged down by any mistakes and feel like you're just not the PIC anymore, because you are. You gotta keep being the PIC. And on that note, Bob Schmelzer said, as your examiner, I'm just as interested in seeing how you react to your mistakes as I am in seeing that you don't make too many of them. I thought that was really useful because you're going to make mistakes and it's okay. Everybody does. But in aviation, you got to react to things that come at you, and that might be your mistake. That might be something out of your control. And examiners want to see how you deal with that. It's super important for safety and for just being a good pilot. So good luck with studying, and keep at it and you'll do great.